Coming up on Theater Talk, are you finding that you're doing new things each time?
Yeah, slowly but surely.
You're just not telling Marianne about
I know. But here's the thing, though, Marianne. The more success he gets, you're going to have to rein him in because...
Don't underestimate this tyrant here.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, you know, Michael, I have seen a lot of plays in my life, many, and I don't think any of them have affected me as much.
Yes, you know, you're a tough old cynical bird, as I
am
well
indeed.
know,
I
and
am
you
indeed.
were reduced to a puddle of tears, as I almost was, because I rarely cry, but there was one little trickle that came down at an absolutely beautiful play on Broadway now called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is here on Broadway from the National Theater, one of the best productions I have ever seen, and I think you can second me on that, Susan.
Absolutely.
It was directed by a really brilliant person, and I don't mean to suck up to you too much, Marianne.
Or be goopy.
Marianne Elliott, she did War Horse and The Curious Incident of the Dog at Night. Oh, welcome to Theater Talk. I think your first time on the show.
It is, yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you with us.
Great to be here.
And the play was adapted from a book, I believe, by Simon Stevens. Welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you very much.
And I don't think it would be as good as it is without a superb performance by the boy who solves the mystery of the dead dog. A newcomer to Broadway, to the theater, I think, Alex Sharp. Welcome to Theater Talk.
Well, thank you so much.
And welcome to the start of what I think is going to be a very brilliant career in the theater.
Thank you.
So, now that we've sucked up to you all, let's get down to business. All right, Marianne, whose idea was it to adapt this well-known book about a boy who has Asperger's syndrome? Was it your idea to adapt this for the theater?
No. I read it when it first came out as a book, and I loved it.
And everybody was reading it. I mean,
yeah, everyone was
prizes.
reading it by Mark Haddon, and that was that. And then about 3-4 years ago,
2008.
Simon gives me a call and says, "I've done this thing," which is a bit crazy. I'm not sure if I should have done it. I'm not sure if it's worked.
But I've also adapted it.
But would you have a read of it? And I know Simon really well. We've worked together a lot. And I thought, well, you know, he's the godfather to my daughter. As a favour, I'll read it. Not a great idea. Not a great idea, because I thought it would be really difficult to do. And I saw it quite filmically, funnily enough. I didn't see it as a play. I had absolutely no clue as to how to stage the thing in it. But I tried to keep all the worries about how you would do it to one side, because when I was reading it, I wasn't going to do it. I was just reading it as a favour. And when I got to the end of it, I just found it incredibly emotional. And I thought, oh my God, I've no idea how this would work, but I've got to do it. It's got to be me. I've got to persuade the National Theatre to do it.
Have you done War Horse yet?
I had done War Horse,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Did you read the book and you thought immediately this could be a play?
I
Where's this coming?
read the book in 2003 when it first came out. And it was a book that really inspired me. It inspired several plays, actually. The consideration of that condition, that lack of empathy, really sat under a lot of my writing. But I was on attachment at the National Theatre studio in 2007 with Mark Haddon, as well as writing novels and writing poetry and making comic books. He's written beautifully for theatre, and he was on attachment at the National Theatre, and we just made friends with each other. Actually, you know, we're very similar men, we're very similar age, we're both fathers, we kind of share the same taste in music. We just used to go on, hang out and grumble with each other. We were mates, and he emailed me. I've still got the email. He emailed me and said, you know, would you think about adapting it? Would you have a crack at it? He'd been approached 100 times
to do something
by
with
theatre producers to get the rights to produce it. And when the producers of Godspell produced him and asked him if they could make a musical out of it, he decided that he wanted to take ownership of how it might be done on the stage. And I think he was drawn to me because I always say that he was attracted to my heart of flint. Because for him, the book isn't a sentimental book. It's not necessarily a soft book. It's not a soft story. And he wanted a dramatist who would have an edge into it.
Could we quickly say what this story is about for those who out there who don't know?
Sure, it's a story about a boy called Christopher John Francis Boone. He's a 15 years old boy who He finds people difficult. I'm reluctant to diagnose him, reluctant to say he's got Asperger's or he's autistic, because I think that's simplistic, but he finds social interaction difficult.
I heard you or Haddon say that this is not a book about autism, it's a book about difference.
Yeah, that's what Mark says all the time. I think it's a book about difference. I think it's a play about family, actually, and about dealing with difference within the family. He goes out at midnight one night and finds in his front yard a dead dog with a garden fork sticking out the side of it, and decides that he's going to find out who killed Wellington, the dog, and goes on a journey that takes him not only to discover the killer of the dog, but to discover all kinds of secrets about his family and about his life.
They would say in Hollywood, it's Agatha Christie meets Rain Man.
They might.
There you go.
That's great.
There you go.
I'm going to totally steal that.
But Alex,
I want to bring Alex into the conversation, though, since this brilliantly talented young man we've been ignoring throughout this whole show. How did you come into this production? I mean, did you have to audition for these people? Did you know them?
I did have to audition for these.
Were you plucked out of obscurity by these guys?
I was.
how did you find the audition?
Quite stressful. Like
No,
most
but I mean,
auditions.
how did you learn about the audition?
Oh, well, a friend of mine, Mark Haddon, was a reader in the room. He was reading with the actors who were coming in and auditioning, and he said, he contacted me and was like, I think you'd be great for this part. If I could try and speak to my friend and help you get in the room, would you like to come in? I was like, of course. So that's how I initially.
You were at Juilliard at the time.
Yeah, I was in my.
And what was your audition piece? What did he?
We saw hundreds. I mean, we saw a huge amount of young boys, and it's very, very difficult to cast because it's very demanding.
Yeah.
He's always on stage.
Yeah, he's never off stage.
Never off stage. He runs every scene. He's the centre of all the scenes. Plus, he goes on incredibly extraordinary emotional journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's very, very physical as well. So a
Yeah.
lot of it is physically expressed.
What did you audition with? Did you have a monologue? Did you? What did you do?
No, the first audition was with Cindy Tolan and Daniel Swee.
The casting director. Daniel.
Yeah, both two casting directors, and they were so lovely. And it was a segment from the play. It was a scene, and I did the scene with the reader, and then I did it again. But it sort of instructed me to do different physical activities while I was doing it. Just multitasking basically. And then the next round was with you, and then after that it was.
With Stephen
Very
Hoggett, wasn't
intense, yeah, hour and a half with Stephen Hoggett.
it? Doing movement.
Yeah.
Do you know, Marianne, when somebody like this comes into the room, you think, this kid has something that I haven't seen with all the hundreds of others?
Well, as I say, because it's such a complex part, and he has to be so good at so many different things that you can't really know immediately. So there might be a few people that you're quite interested in, and then you pare it down, and you pare it down, and you pare it down. I mean, I do remember thinking that Alex had an extraordinary quality, very sort of clear. You could read him very easily. You could read his emotions.
No guile, no guile.
Exactly.
Yes, this is a boy who never lies. They set it up, yes.
Yeah, and you could access him. There's some people that you really warm to on stage, and I felt Alex was that, so I was really pleased that he passed the movement audition.
Okay, when did you decide that this kid could do it for you?
I let Marianne decide. I always let Marianne decide everything like this.
It's always
much better.
best.
I'd say what is true, what's interesting, because I wasn't in New York for the casting. I'd met Alex in the first week of rehearsal. But I've rarely seen Marianne's face light up when I've asked her about an actor. And in London, I said to Marianne, so what's our Christopher like? And she beamed.
Yeah,
And I thought, yeah, he might be all right.
Not that
then.
we don't want to turn your head out.
I know.
You're young in your life.
You still have a lot of pitfalls in showbiz to navigate, my friend.
No, I'm sure.
You say that we don't define Christopher as autistic. I mean, all the symptoms point towards it. But you said that you did do research, talking to autistic people and reading.
Yeah, and it was all sort of taken. I took as like incredibly helpful information. Everything from we went to CUSAC at a school where they very kindly opened their doors and we could go in and meet young people on the spectrum, and to reading autobiographies by people who are on the spectrum. It was all very informative to create the character.
The boy has physical tics. I'm curious to know, just a technical question here, but is every every little quirk and tick that you do, is it completely choreographed, every little moment, or are you allowed the freedom as an actor to do a little shoulder weird thing here and there depending on what's going on in the scene at that point? Or is everything completely mapped out by this tyrannical director that you work for?
I think what is worth saying initially is that the whole show, there's quite a lot of effects and quite a lot of magic things that come out of the set, which is a magic box in itself, because it's Christopher's brain.
Yes.
The whole show is cued
It's inside
off.
his mind.
Yeah, it's all cued off what Alex does. So Alex has to scene change at exactly the right moment because so that the stage manager can cue a huge effect on his body movements. So there is a lot of it which is incredibly specific, but there's also a lot which is down to your free interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah, like within the scenes, I mean, there are these like a lot of internal cues that I have to hit.
Right.
But within the scenes, there's a lot of, like the physicality you're speaking about. I'm kind of unaware of a lot of those things that I'm doing.
Are you finding that you're doing new things each time?
Yeah, slowly but surely.
You're just not telling Marianne about
I know. But here's the thing, though, Marianne. The more success he gets, you're going to have to rein him in because it
He
could
could become
be
like Zero Mostel.
It could be. It could be. Could it not be dangerous though?
Don't
this kind of
underestimate this tyrant here. Don't,
performance? No, but I mean, it's a legitimate question, though.
No, but it is an interesting question, isn't it? Because it's a tricky sort of science. And I suppose what we have done is done a huge amount of work on who the character is and what his relationships are and how he feels or doesn't feel about certain things. So within that, those are sort of like guidelines, but within that, there's quite a lot of freedom. I mean, you could even action a line. For example, you could say in this line, you're trying to please your father, you're trying to arrest somebody, or you're trying to halt somebody, but you can still do that in lots and lots of different ways. And watching Alex over the previews, and actually in the rehearsal room as well, the last runs in the rehearsal room, you can see what I call him lifting off, where she's just really starting to get the groove of it and starting to play around with it within those guidelines, which is really exciting to watch as a director, because you never want somebody to reproduce exactly what you
They're
want.
not puppets, even though
Exactly.
you worked with puppets.
Yeah,
but-
they're not puppets. And when they meet you halfway, it's like jiving. It's like, oh, you're doing that move. Okay, well, I'll do this move. And it's a lovely symbiosis.
And there must be that moment where what you call liftoff, where suddenly the actor becomes the character and the two become indistinguishable, and that's when you have genius.
That's the way it's really exciting.
Going back to your process, Marianne, then you read the script. When did you get this inspiration that you were going to have the staging be the inside of Christopher's mind, and how you were going to handle it with this incredible electronic world you've established?
It took a long time. It always takes a lot longer than you think. You know, you go to the theatre and you think, oh, that's a great idea. They must have come up with that over a day or so. It took weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And we went into the National Theatre studio with some actors for a week, and we worked on how we might do the journey to London in a very minimal sense, because this boy goes on this big journey to get to London. For him, it's very scary. And we tried to work out how could we do it with just the actors and in a very imaginative way, and what's the most imaginative we could do it, and what are the biggest risks that we could take that would be really interesting and right if we wanted to try and get inside his brain. And that taught us a lot of things. And then Bonnie Christie and I, the designer, and I spent literally weeks around a model box, arguing, shouting, throwing things, finding things. And when we came up with this idea that it was his brain, which is more of Bonnie's idea really than it was mine, but when we came up with that idea, then we started to get very excited, and that led to all sorts of other things. That if it was his brain where he was trying to work things out, and if he says that his brain's a bit like a machine or a computer, then that enabled us to start thinking about all sorts of scenes in quite exciting ways.
Simon, when you were adapting the book, though, did you have this idea that this production is going to be inside this boy's mind?
I think it was quite a strong idea. I think it was certainly an idea that Mark Haddon was quite keen on and quite keen to push me towards. I think what I did know secretly is that I knew that Marianne would direct it.
Yeah.
So when
Before
I gave
she
it
did
to
you
her,
the favour.
when I gave it to her and said, have a read of this, just as a favour, have a read of this, I kind of knew she's not going to be able to resist this. Yeah, I did. I knew.
Oh my God.
No, I did. I totally did. And I knew that there would be no director in the world who could do it quite as well. who would have that sense of democracy and inventiveness. The other thing I knew was that I wanted Stephen Hoggart and Scott Graham, who formed Frantic Assembly together to do the movement. That the sense I had was that the way Christopher thinks, his thinking is balletic. The agility with which he moves from thought to thought to thought is the agility of a dancer, and that it lent itself to that physical kind of dance. And all of those ideas together were an attempt to dramatise that which the novel creates, which is absolutely excavating the interior of Christopher Boone's brain. So it was really central to the whole thing. It was how you get what's in there outside in his behaviour. Yeah.
Very interesting you say that, balletic and choreography, because in your mind, the boy you're playing, everything makes sense. I mean, everything, from his point of view, everything is logical, even though we on the outside see this kind of a fractured mind. But to you, everything is totally seamless.
There's a set of rules, and when something doesn't make sense, it's incredibly upsetting. And that's how he works. Is he's like constantly trying to click things into place.
You're on stage the entire play, as we said before. When do you collect your energy? I mean, you fall apart and fall over a few times, but
He's 25.
No, but
that's the whole.
that's a really good question, because it's tough. It is really tough, isn't it?
I think, yeah, I think like the 2 hours leading up to the start of the show is quite crucial for me. Just like,
Oh, what do you do then?
I mean,
Drink.
I drink a lot of, I drink water all day because I sweat so much in the show.
There's a big warm-up, isn't there?
There's a big warm-up, physical warm-up, and just like getting myself in the zone, I guess, and because it's such an emotional journey, so there's kind of like a release with that like you have to let go of like a certain amount of control that you have as an actor to go emotionally where he goes. But at the same time, what's happening at the same time is that there's like an incredibly choreographed show that takes an immense amount of focus to be able to execute like moment by moment, just so it can move smoothly from start to finish. So it's about focusing, and it's like a kind of specific warm-up and just thinking about what you're about to do and stuff.
I always thought Eileen Atkins was on the show once, and we were just talking technically about acting, and she said an actor has to have two rivers flowing in the mind at the same time, and the one is all of the technical things you have to do. You have to hit the cues. You have to cross here. You know that if I raise my hand like this, I'm going to get this kind of laugh. If I put my hand down here, I'm going to get that kind of laugh. But the other river flowing is then I become the character.
Yeah.
And then I'm not thinking about these things that I have to think about.
That's the thing
and
about
she says
being-
when those two things are going, that's when you're acting.
Yeah, especially on the stage.
Yeah.
I think if you're a stage actor, you have to be incredibly technical. It's just surprising how technical it is, as well as have the whole psychological depth that's going on.
To become the
Yeah.
character.
Do you become the character?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen. No, I mean, but because so you seem to me to become the character, but to you, do you ever go off stage when it's over and you can't shake it?
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
I've seen it happen in rehearsal room.
Yeah.
Well, Alex.
Come back.
There are two guys that play Christopher. 'Cause
Right.
It is such a demanding role.
Yes.
So Alex does it for 6 shows a week, and Taylor Trench does it for 2, because we've found in the past that actually it can absolutely take you over. So yeah.
Just in the little bit of time we have left, since you're all great people of the theater, I'd love to get a sense of your backgrounds and why you fell in love with the theater. Simon, I mean, do you remember the first play you saw, or what was where something clicked in your fractured mind that said, I want to be in this zany business?
My fractured mind and my heart of flint. You know, when I grew up in Manchester, we grew up around the corner from each other.
Oh, so you've been friends for...
No, we never knew
know.
each other. We didn't meet until we were adults, but we did grow up around the corner from each other. I never went to serious theatre with my family. We used to go every Christmas to see a show.
Pantomimes, right?
Yeah, to see pantomimes or to see a show. I have very vivid memories of seeing Barnum, for example, in the Manchester Palace. It was when I went to university, and the drama I grew up on was television and film drama, and American movies, New York movies very often, Martin Scorsese movies, David Lynch movies, or British television drama. So for me, the dramatic experience was
kind of
on the
gritty
screen.
sort of stuff? Yeah.
Exactly. I went to university, and all the most attractive girls at York University wanted to be actresses. So in a pathetic and ultimately entirely fruitless attempt to meet these girls, I would go and watch them in really rather wretched productions of things like The Real Inspector Hound is one that lives out as being one of the worst experiences of theatre I've ever seen. It's a fine play. That production, it didn't work.
Was the girl cute?
Yeah, no, she was always. They're always cute. But what I did realise was, having grown up with screen drama and also live music, you know, in Manchester in the 80s when I grew up, there's so much extraordinary live music. I used to go and see a band every weekend, and I'd go and see this play and realise there was the potential to combine the proper kind of forensic exploration of real drama, of like a Martin Scorsese movie, with the liveness of a live gig, and that you could hold the audience in a room and capture them with the possibility that something alive was happening. And I just saw it then, and it's all I've ever wanted to do since.
Alex, I mean, you're young, but there must have been some moment in your life where you thought, geez, I want to be on stage and have people look at me and applaud me and give me awards.
Well, for maybe slightly different reason to that, but the first play I ever did was like a school play when I was like 7. I played Piglet and Winnie the Pooh. Yeah. A similar level of challenge to this. No, I did it, and like I'd grown up for the first 7 years of my life. I was like traveling in a caravan with my family around the States and around Europe and everything, which is amazing.
Your parents are not in show business, though, are they?
They're not, no, and they just traveled because they love traveling. And then, so I like kind of grew up. I'd get homeschooled by my mum, who was a teacher, a great teacher, and I would sort of like learn about the history of like a castle or something, you know, in Italy, and then we'd go and climb on the castle, and then that night I would like write creatively about it. So I had this kind of like really free education very early. And then then we came to, we went to Devon in England. My sister got into a great grammar school. That's why we moved there, and I started school, and I ever since, I've had massive problems like sitting behind a desk. But I did the school, you know, so I was struggling. It was a pretty massive transition to like start being like a...
Having been a sort of a vagabond, a nomad your whole life, to have to settle down.
Yeah. My whole life being like 7 short.
Right, yes.
Yeah. And then I did a play, and I was like, oh, that feels kind of like free and creative, and people seem to like what I did, so I did another one, and then a lady called June Millman sort of put me in like some amateur operettas as like the child, sort of wrote me in as comical parts. I was always kind of the class clown. And then from there I just started like being put in like musicals, all sort of like equivalent of regional theatre in England, in Devon, in Exeter. And then I kind of gave it up for a few years and travelled through South America, and then ended up...
You're a real bohemian, aren't you?
I guess. Sure.
How did you wind up at Juilliard? Just like sort of, oh, I'm happen to be passing through New York, so I'll audition?
Kind of, yeah.
Is that really what I'm telling you?
I mean, I wanted to get back to acting, and I'd been away from it for a while. I don't know, there's something about the States and New York. It's a dream for me to live in New York. I really wanted to live in New York, and then so when I heard about Juilliard, an excellent drama school in the middle of New York City, I was like, that's perfect.
That's the place for me. And Marianne, your journey, as we say in the theatre, to becoming a great director.
I had a very different upbringing. My parents were in the theatre, my grandparents were in the theatre, a lot of my family members were actors. So consequently, I sort of rebelled against it and thought, that's the one thing I'm not going to do. But then when I was in my late 20s and I'd done bits of university and had enjoyed it, I was working in casting in television and loved it, but kept finding that we were casting for male directors and male producers who would then go on to work with these actors. And the minute the job started, we were off doing casting for something else. And again, the minute the filming started, we were off. I just got frustrated with that. But at the time, there weren't that many female directors, so I didn't think it was possible. But in my holidays, I just, with a friend of mine, set up a theatre company, and we used to rehearse in my bedroom in my flat, and it just slowly took off. I mean, I had no 5-year plan or anything, but I was lucky. It just worked out.
Well, you've done a brilliant job with The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is at the Ethel Barrymore Theatre. Susan, you and I both think this is a real masterpiece, I would have to say, on Broadway. Brilliantly directed by Marianne Elliott. Brilliantly adapted by Simon Stevens, and okay performance. No, brilliant performance by Alex Sharp in the principal role. So, thank you very much for being our guest tonight on Theatre Talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Where is heaven?
I'm sorry, Christopher?
In our universe, whereabouts is it exactly?
It's not in our universe. It's another kind of place altogether.
There isn't anything outside our universe, Reverend Peters. There isn't another kind of place altogether. Except there might be if you went through a black hole. But a black hole is what is called a singularity, which means it's impossible to find out what is on the other side, because the gravity of the black hole is so big that even electromagnetic waves like light can't get out of it. And electromagnetic waves are how we get information about things which are very far away. So if heaven was on the other side of a black hole, that would mean that dead people would have to be fired into space on a rocket to get there. And they aren't, or people would notice.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theatre Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, and the Theater Development Fund's Technical Accessibility Program, which helps provide closed captioning.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theatre Talk. Thank you and good night.